If you think that we just fucking DJ'd in the 90s, you're fucking insulting us. And if you're an old school DJ from back in the day who didn't quite make it, he was out robbing phone boxes in the late 80s. You had a machine and you broke open the phone boxes and the money would come out. And it would be like record tokens. And we would bunk school and we'd go Music Power, we'd go Groove. We'd go to the graffiti yard over Finsbury Park. One day, Joe Labyrinth comes in and I take my shot, John. This music owes us nothing. This music owes no one nothing. We owe the world the gift of this music to be able to play it to them. And let's fucking celebrate and share and enjoy something that's more than 30 seconds.
Welcome to the next episode of Crate Diggin with me, the Vinyl Junkie. Today's guest needs no introduction. He's an absolute legend in the game and also happens to be a very close friend of mine. So it's with great pleasure and also a bit of an honour that I bring to you the man like Billy Daniel Bunter. So this is no doubt going to be the longest episode of Crate Diggin so far. Daniel's of course done many interviews and podcasts over the years, but this is the one where he dives deepest and in the most detail into his biggest passion in life, which is vinyl records. So come and join me as we dig deep into the crates of Billy Daniel Bunter. So Dan, tell me, what was your very first memory of vinyl and records?
So my very, very earliest memories of records is my mum taking me and my brother to Woolworths, Our Prices, and every new number one that would get into the chart, my mum would buy us. And I can literally vividly remember my mum taking us in. And I also remember my earliest memories of sharing music and records and vinyl with people and seeing people dance to the records that you own. So when you let me know that that was one of the questions, I said to you, I can remember when there would be school discos, you would take your records in and you would put your name on the record. And because my mum had brought us so many records, we always had a lot of records that we would take into the school discos. And I've actually found you a record from 1982 that has my name on it, Daniel Light, and my brother, who's 3 years younger than me, would have taken it in further down the line, and it's got his name. And I've got to show you this because I must say, everyone, I've known Vinyl Junkie for over 30 years, and I've never seen him frustrated with me ever in my life of knowing him. But he's come round and I'm not organised, I'm faffing around and I'm literally like an old tart. And he's like, bloody hell, he's had a long day. So this Eddy Grant, I Don't Want to Dance. And on this is my brother's name, Paul Light, and my name, Daniel Light, and the record's 1982. And I hadn't thought, and even on the records, both our names are on there. And bizarrely enough, which we'll get onto, further down the line, many years down the line from this, like 1990, 91 times, we all used to write our names on the records at Labyrinth, which we'll get onto later. But I never thought about this until I dug this record out. And there's loads. There's thousands and thousands of 7-inches up there, reggae, pop, a lot. Well, I've got thousands of soul and funk 7-inches over there. But if you'd have told me in 1982 that I would be dizzy off of I Don't Want to Dance and Electric Avenue, the buzz of knowing that me and my brother were taking more records into school than anyone else, and being fascinated with people dancing to my family's 7-inch singles, that in the year 2025 I would be on my internet rampage sharing knowledge and history about music that is undiscovered or unknown to the world at large. And Eddy Grant has got such an amazing, rich heritage that goes right back to the late 60s. So for a young man like me, a young child at 7, fascinated by Eddy Grant in 1982, I'd have had no clue that he'd gone back as far as the late 60s and was making disco in the 70s. And in recent decades, as a real geeky vinyl enthusiast, I discovered the Coach House Rhythm Gang Time Warp, which is an Eddy Grant production from 1977. And last year I did this deep dive into it on my Instagram, and I was just elated when Eddy Grant collabed with me on this post and personally messaged me and said, thank you so much for highlighting this disco record, because I framed it as house music before house music. Not only did Eddy Grant reach out to me and thank me for sharing this piece of history and knowledge, people like Questlove from The Roots and Jelly Bean, who made Jingo and was a massive part of the disco scene in the late 70s and 80s, and Masters at Work, and all of these legendary names started getting involved with my post, going, this man from England's right, this is house music from house music before house music from the late 70s. And I come to learn that Eddy Grant had been inspired by Larry Levan and been to the Paradise Garage. So yeah, to think that at the age of 7, I had my name written on this and my brother, and I would get to talk to Eddy Grant basically when I was in my 50s. So yeah, my earliest memories of records and sharing records with people.
So where did your real actual record collecting journey begin, and what was the first record you ever actually bought with your own money?
So this is a real double-pronged question. So the absolute influence of my mum buying me all of those 7-inch singles, also my earliest memories of seeing records and being fascinated beyond the 7 inches, Love Child, Diana Ross and the Supremes, which was owned by my mum. She also had, and check this, with names on records, this is an original press of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. My second name's Light, my mum's second name's Light, my dad's name was Light. But before that, she was Vise. And on this record from 1967 is my mum's name, Beverly Vise. So this fascination of music just kept on growing and growing and growing. If you could pass me that record there, John. No, Electro 5. For the purpose of the camera, John passes Daniel a record. Electro 5. So my dad completely begun to acknowledge this absolute love for music that I had, and he would introduce me to Brian Ferry, UB40. They're all here. I'll show you them as we go along. And he discovered electro music, electro hip-hop music on the Street Sounds Electro series, and he introduced me to Electro 5, and it blew me away. I was 10 years of age. It was released 1985, 1984. Wow. But he introduced me to this, and it absolutely blew me away. It was so different to the early UB40 albums he'd introduced me to. It was worlds away from Brian Ferry. It was worlds away from my mum's love for Diana Ross, worlds away from the Beatles. It was worlds away from every pop record #1 that was getting into the top of the Pops chart. And what blew me away was the hypnoticness and the continuum of the music and the mix. And I'm 10 years of age, and there's It's Time to Rock, Great Peso and Mr. Nasty. There's Fast Life, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it's like, it's it's the first time yes, the message Grandmaster Melly Mel was a chart hit a few years previous, but there was something about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Fast Life, that just painted this picture of New York, which further down the line and in my life, I've had an absolute fascination with New York. Techno Scratch, Knights of the Turntable, Egypt, Breakers Revenge, Captain Rock to the Future Shock, Release Yourself, Aline, which was probably unconsciously, my love for black, soulful, disco, funk, soul, boogie music comes from my mum and the Diana Ross. But being hit with Aline, Release Yourself, was like, wow. Soulful, soul-stirring vocal on hypnotic electronic beats. The buck stops here, fantasy free, B-boys breakdance, high fidelity free. And from this moment on, I did not want to be anything other than a DJ. All I wanted to do was DJ. All I wanted to know was more about this music. If there was art classes in school to, you know, at 10, 11 years old of age, to draw things that you like, it'd be the Electro 5 sleeve. I couldn't wait to get home and listen to Electro 5. And then my dad started bringing in more of these things, Electro 4, Electro 3, Electro 1. Then this series began to grow and grow and grow. And at like the age of 10, I'm hearing the name Mike Allen, Capitol Radio, and I'm learning more about Street Sounds. And then my dad's recording Mike Allen from Capitol, and I'm hearing even more of this rap, this hip hop, this electro music that is not being featured on these albums. And right there is the absolute root of my obsession. And you asked, when did my collecting start? So the absolute very first record, as in a 12-inch record, that I brought out of my absolute curiosity and passion and need to know more about the music contained on the Electro albums and that was being played by Mike Allen on Capitol Radio, was the B-Boys, Girls and Stick Up Kid, which is the Street Wave UK pressing. And Street Wave was the singles company, the subsidiary, if you like, or maybe even the whatever one. Street Sounds was maybe the umbrella, or Street Wave was the umbrella, but Street Wave, Street Sounds, they was all part of the same company. And it's got the catalogue number M Khan 46, and M Khan's Morgan Khan, the man who owns Street Sounds and Street Wave Records. And basically how I acquired this as my first ever 12-inch purchase out of my own money, it was Enfield High Road, it was Our Price Records, it was 1985, this released 1985. I was 10 years of age and I was out fly pitching with my uncle Johnny. And for those who don't know what fly pitching is when you illegally, you're all thinking Del Boy and Rodney here, aren't you? You illegally pull up on the side of the road and you sell whatever goods you've got. So some people sell watches and perfumes and whatever, but my family was in the fruit and veg trade. So if they'd had a bad weekend or the fruit hadn't sold and they had fruit left on the stalls, they would then go and fly pitch all out of where their usual pitch was, which is in Wood Green, and Wood Green plays a huge part at Haringey in my vinyl journey. So we've jumped out on Enfield High Road, we're fly pitching, my uncle's selling the fruit, me and the other workers, bear in mind I'm 10, we're illegally fly pitching. So as fruit's being sold out, I'm having to then go onto the lorry, get more fruit and give it to my uncle with the others. I'm 10, I'm useless. I'm useless at any form of labour work. It was at that point in my life I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do this. I just want records, records, records. We were fly pitched outside an ale price. And all of you people who love records, who remember back to shops like Our Price, they would have weekly releases in the window. And this was in the window. And I just looked. I hadn't seen an Electro 12-inch from these albums that my dad had been getting. This was on Electro 7. And I just looked in the window, and there was the B-Boys, Girls and Stick Up Kid. And I said to my uncle, can I have my wages? It was like £2 or £3 a UK press. I think it was £1.99 or £2.99. And off I sloped, a 10-year-old boy, and said, can I have the one in the window, please? And that was my first ever underground 12-inch record, which in later years, which we'll get onto, my passion in life was collecting every single original 12-inch import or album that maybe had an album track that was featured on Electros. My life mission was to buy not only every single Electro album that was released on Street Sounds, but every single record that was licensed to create them albums, of which I did, which we'll go into later on, and it will give you a great insight into my obsession with collecting records, hunting down the rarities, why I appreciate and why I'm really big on also don't po the cheaper records, because sometimes the cheaper records are the best records. And yeah, and that was my first ever experience. Now, it then progresses on from there, because once you've been into an Our Price and you're hearing Mike Allen talk about groove records, and then you're discovering pirate radio on the airwaves, and you're taking in Kiss FM for the first time, which launched in 1985, and you're hearing Kiss FM talk about Music Power Records, and your family's from Wood Green. And not only is your family from Wood Green, they work the market stalls of Wood Green. They've got fruit and veg shops in Wood Green. Wood Green, from where my family's stalls were walking distance to this record shop called Music Power that you'd hear mentioned on Kiss FM. And a number of the DJs who were DJs on Kiss FM, I'm talking Kiss FM 5 years before it became a commercial radio station. And the very, very first underground music emporium that I went into was Music Power Records on Green Lanes, Haringey. And I just want to say that for the purpose of John's amazing video and what he's doing and how intertwined music is, when John got to mine and Sonia's house, he'd been with Pete Cannon. And Pete Cannon's recordings label is named N4. Pete sent John away with this record. And Pete's label is called N4. The address of Music Power Records is 37 Grand Parade, Green Lanes, Haringey, London, N4. Pete's studio is literally a few doors away from where Music Power Records was. And that always fascinates Pete. And Pete has continued on now the legacy of what happened in that area, which I absolutely love. But anyway, contained in this bag is the first two records that me and my dad ever brought in Music Power Haringey. Tila Rock, Breaking Bells and Bass Machine, which was featured, I think it was Electro 14, I think, or was it 14? And on this is a tag, D-La Rock. I was not destined for graffiti, in the same reason I was not destined for breakdancing. But yeah, I thought I'd make my name D-La Rock because it's by Tila Rock. I was 11 years of age, look. And funnily enough, I had some of my friends from school were heavily into graffiti, and throughout 86, 87, we would go into London, into Groove Records actually, on the train, and a number of my older friends would hang off the back of the trains writing their names. They were great taggers. I wasn't. And then this was the first, listen to what I'm saying, the first ever import from America that my dad brought for me. Steady B, Bring the Beat Back, an incredible album from 1986. And it was just, look, this is battered. It's not in the cellophane. Anyone who buys my records know that I love to shrink wrap my music, but the buzz of shrink wrapped vinyl was just it blew my mind. And then when you open the shrink wrap and you smelt the record, and it just had this fresh smell to it. And this record shop, Music Power, become my training ground. It become my inspiration. It become the place that I would bunk school and be in 2 or 3 times a week. It would be the place where listen, this is way before acid house. This is way before ecstasy commercially meets house music. This is way before anyone put breakbeat into a house record and people started murmuring the words hardcore or rave or jungle. This is like, I'm talking 85, 86. And this place, it become everything to me. Like Nick Power would work in the shop. He was an owner. He would be on Kiss FM and I would tune in to Nick Power on Kiss. H was a big soul man, and he educated me to loads of soul. Ray Goodman and Brown, lots of street soul around about 86 and 87 was coming through from London, like Rick Clark and Deluxe, and tongue-in-cheeks early stuff like 86, 87, and I was getting introduced to street soul. I was then getting introduced to very, very early house music on DJ International and Trax Records. Chris Simon worked in there. Dean Savon. Dean Savon was a huge influence. Probably the person, by educating me and selling me records, was introducing me to just incredible what we would now call gospel house music, like church, like soulful house music. Arnold Jarvis, Take Some Time Out, Full House, I Remember, music by Blaze, moving records that further down the line would have Phase 2 reaching this real black church-like gospel soulful music, and it just blew me away. And this record shop, without my mum, without my dad, without this record shop, I would not have gained the knowledge and the fascination and the need to study music that was coming in from America to London. I would not have had the fascination to keep turning the dial on the radio to hear more and more and more. And how I acquired this Music Power bag was a follower of my pages heard me talk about Music Power Records only within recent months either. And thank you, mate. I don't know what to say that you gifted me this record bag. And he said, I heard you talk about it, and have you got a record bag? And I said, no, I haven't. And he kindly gifted it to me. Cool, and I basically, as soon as I got it, I put the Tila Rock and the Steady B records into it.
What was your earliest memory of the acid house and rave scene?
So my earliest memories of the acid scene was my best friend from school, and I make sure that every time I tell this story, he is mentioned, right? So my best friend from school, Anthony Atchley, who was 4 years older than me, And we would bunk school and we'd go Music Power, we'd go Groove, we'd go to the graffiti yard over Finsbury Park. We were just hell bent on music and discovering music. And at the time I was more into the hip hop and the electro, and he was into the house that was coming through and was listening to Jazzy M on LWR. And he was the person who really started going to me, listen to Nitro Deluxe, let's get busy, listen to this music on Trax Records, listen to this DJ International stuff. And I was so caught up at 11, 12 with all Mike Allen, with Dave Pearce, with Roger Johnson, that I was youthful and I was like, oh, no, I don't. And then it just started grabbing me more and more, and the influence of like the guys who I mentioned in the record shop, you just couldn't ignore it. You just could not ignore it. So as I'm going into Music Power with my dad or Anthony, or maybe being in there on my own, these incredible hypnotic minimal records on DJ International, on Trax, on labels like this, Rocking House music really started to take over me and take over from the electro and the hip hop that I'd been into. And I always remember this Miyoshi Morris music, which was on this legendary label Rocking House. And Rocking House is kind of a label that doesn't get spoken about as much as Trax and DJ International, and a lot of like the more Detroit techno legends and the Transmats and stuff. But this Rocking House had some incredible music on it. And again, it's another one that music comes full circle when you're sharing music with people. And 6 months ago, I shared my love for this Miyoshi Morris music track on Instagram. And Tyree Cooper, the producer, awesome, super duper trooper, he messaged me and he said, that's my sister. That's my sister singing on that record, right? And I would never have dreamt, like in my life, still to this day at 50, so many things happened that started my journey in music or inspired me in music. And then like 35, 38, 40, 45, in Eddy Grant's case, almost 50 years later, I end up meeting these people or talking to these people. So I would never have ever have dreamt that Tyree Cooper would message me through a thing called the internet when I first brought this in like 87, 88, to say to me, hey, Billy, man, that's my sister. In equal measures, I could never have dreamt that I would be at Clockwork Orange in the old school tent playing alongside Tyree Cooper and having him on before me. But records like this, and my friend Anthony's influence and Dean Savon's influence in Music Power, and also listening to Jazzy M, LWR, again, years later, Jazzy M, the person who kind of introduced acid to London, which is so well documented, and he rightly so should get that accolade. His radio show used to be after me every Monday on Ministry of Sound. My first experience of DJing acid house, my very first experience of DJing acid house was 88 to late 88, early 89. I was 13 years of age. A family called the Bakers in Wood Green, they were having an acid party in a house, in their parents' house, and they knew that me and Anthony had records. Anthony had far more records than me. He was older, but they knew that we had records, and they knew that we could DJ, or were trying to DJ. It took me years to learn how to actually mix and DJ, but they knew we had the music. And in late 88, we were the DJs to this all-night acid party in a house in Wood Green, you know, on my own Rave Story TV channel, lots of people talk about DJing in houses around North and East London, and my introduction to that was an acid party. And the thing that blew me away most about it, and something that at first I never understood, and then within a year of playing at these house parties for this family, playing like basements in pubs for them, I grew to understand what Balearic beats were that moved side to side with acid house, and records like William Pitt, City Lights, and records like Carly Simon, Why, records like Wooden Tops, Why, records like The Whole of the Moon were getting played alongside Fast Eddie and Frankie Knuckles, Your Love, and Rhythm is Rhythm, Strings of Life. These parties were only 20, 30, 40, 50 people, it packed into a living room. But it gave me another curiosity on top of already a curious mind about acid house, hip hop, electro. All of a sudden, like, what? Like seeing people like on ecstasy, listening to this fast music, but then all of a sudden William Pitt's City Lights would come on and it would be these euphoric moments. And very quickly I learned that this was music being imported and coming back over from Ibiza, and lots of this crowd from Wood Green had been going to Ibiza in 87, 88, 89, and they, without realising it, was basically educating me to this alternate world that run parallel with acid house music, whilst there was also an amazing hip hop scene there. You know, Jungle Brothers, De La Soul, there was just so much amazing stuff going on.
So, tell us about Paul's Records and how working there affected you.
Paul for Music was a dusty old record shop that had been Paul for Music since the 50s. And me and my dad stumbled across it. I say this story all the time with a smile on my face. We was out robbing phone boxes in the late 80s in London, if you're from that kind of family, who fly pitch at the side of the road when they're not meant to. They will have many little fiddles, and one of the fiddles was you had a machine and you broke open the phone boxes and the money would come out, and it would be like record tokens for me and my dad. And I always get, when I say that, people underneath going, oh, but you're incriminating yourself. Look, it was 37 years ago. And so we go past this record shop called Paul for Music. We're over in East London. And we go in this shop, and I don't think much of it, because it's just this dusty old shop full of 7 inches, full of rock, full of pop. Just, by this point in 1989, you know, I'd been record shopping since 85 with my dad. By this point, I'd frequented Groove Records, Bluebird. By that point, Black Market Records had opened. Music Power had been my mainstay shop. They wasn't dusty old record shops. They were super cool black music specialists that were moving with the time as it was happening. But Paul for Music, on the face of it, was absolutely stuck in time, like in the 60s, 70s. And we walked in and we like, I was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, Raven Mays, Forever Together starts playing in the shop, and Ral Oriolana, The Real Wild House, and Landlord, I Like It, and all kinds of tunes. And it's like, what? And this is at the end of the shop. So I'm like, I want that one, I want that. And my dad's got money on him because we've just done the phone boxes. So we've ended up getting 10, 15 records in this shop. So I'm inquisitive. I've always been inquisitive. I've always been inquisitive. So I'm saying to this guy, oh mate, are you a DJ? And he's like, yeah, I'm on Centreforce. He told me his name was Jazzy M. His name was genuinely Jazzy M, but he wasn't Jazzy M from LWR. It was just unfortunate that there was Jazzy M from LWR who would go on to get the just credit. And then Mervyn was Jazzy M and was on Centreforce. And I was just in awe of Mervyn. I was in awe of Dave, who owned Pull for Music, and I would come to learn that this was the hub for the East End rave scene. Like Centreforce DJs would go in there, Sunrise DJs would go in there, Labyrinth DJs would go in there, Genesis DJs would go in there. It was just this hub, right? And by the second or third time of going in there, it become our main shop. At that point, me and my dad acquiring records, Music Power was a distant memory, to be fair. Groove Records had become a distant memory because Pull for Music was just so good. And by our third, fourth time in there, my dad said to Dave, the owner, can my son have a job? Dave was Paul's son, and Dave's gone, yeah, he can start next Saturday. Or this Saturday, it was midweek. So in I go, Saturday afternoon, do my job. My wage was £12 a day. Now, I want you to understand that when me and my dad was, and I say this with a joyful pride, and I would never teach my children or my grandchildren to go that way, but I say it with like a smile on my face. It was getting up to no good innocently. We would spend £80 to £100 a week on records, basically. And I got this job for £12 on a Saturday, but it meant I wasn't out up to no good with my dad. So even though I was in a record shop, my £12 didn't actually stretch that far for records compared to the amount of records my dad and I had acquired. And it always blew people away because I'm kind of a lot younger than a lot of my peers who I DJ with, even to this day. And we just amassed a load of records. But when I started in the shop, all of the sudden, my piles of records kind of went down a little bit. But I just loved being in this record shop. And it sent me down, being in this shop surrounded by music that went back as far as the 50s. Like, Pull for Music was kind of like a little shop that you went into, and then out the back was this massive storeroom, and there was no computer system. And you, when new records would come in, my job was to go quite literally 150,201, because this record shop had 100,000 plus records in it. So I would write it, and if it was a dance record, it would go in the dance folder. If it was a pop record, it would go in the pop folder, and you just write all this stuff out. But underneath in this shop that went underneath Cambridge Heath Road, there was fucking tons of 7s and 78s that went as far back as the 50s, and it was hundreds of thousands of records underneath that had been there for like at that point 30 odd years, 35 years, and I was just surrounded by this music. So then all of a sudden, because I'm so fascinated by the acid house scene and what's surrounding me, I'm then delving deeper into like Woodstock and the festival scene of the late 60s. I'm then like being on like the border of Hackney, Bethnal Green, all around that era. The shop also sold reggae. So I'm then getting a real taste of like reggae music, and the shop would also have video tapes and stuff. So I'm experiencing, like, it just sent me down a rabbit hole of like wanting to watch Woodstock in the late 60s. But then these videos of like Skateland and sound system reggae dances in the mid 80s were filtering through to England as well. And that would make, I was just soaking up even more culture and heritage, even at that point, even though the acid house scene was about, and the rave scene and the bleeps and bass was about to become this humongous thing in my life. So John, our old Babber, has just said, just go and get the records out there, right? And because he says, you've got an obsession with Woodstock. Look, we've come to learn in later life that my ADHD is through the roof. We make no bones about that. And we've had actual experts on my podcast say, you have ADHD through the roof. And I'm obsessive. And when I discover stuff, I am obsessive in the same way that I was obsessive with the electro and having to be on this lifelong mission of owning every 12-inch on those albums, like I was obsessive in my pursuit with certain aspects of my career and collecting music. Once I go down rabbit holes of stuff, I become obsessive, and Woodstock for me was beyond the rave. So that's Woodstock, the kind of main album that everyone knows. But I never knew that Woodstock also did a second part to their amazing festival that happened in the late 60s. What fascinated me was I experimented with speed and acid at the age of 14 in like 89, but I didn't start experimenting with ecstasy till early to mid 1990. But acid had grabbed me in such a way, records like Miyoshi Morris had grabbed me in such a I'm going to use the word spiritual, and it kind of like this wave of hypnotism without taking drugs. And after getting a taste of like these house parties and back rooms of pubs at a young age, way before the Labyrinth comes into play, the hypnoticness of the music and my vision of what ecstasy and underground music and the beating heartbeat and gathering people and people coming together as one and people sharing the moment of music and artists and being in these decadent spaces that you're not meant to be. I just kept going deeper and deeper in, and it took me back to Woodstock. I'm 13, 14 years of age, fascinated with Woodstock. But in equal measures, I'm fascinated by the sound system tapes I'm hearing. It all comes back to a hypnoticness that I originally felt in the electroness. In the electro albums, it all goes back to sharing the records that me and my brother owned with the other kids in the class and seeing them dance and react. And Woodstock fascinated me, that people, in the case of Woodstock, a single promoter could have the idea and gather people together. And there is a humongous drug aspect about it, and I've never made any bones about Love Doves and ecstasy. My book's named after Love Dove, the Love Dove ecstasy tablet. But it fascinated me that as people who promote music, who love music, can gather people to enjoy things together in spaces that you're not meant to be at. And that was such a big thing about rave for me. But I needed to understand Woodstock. I needed to go back further. I needed to study and watch this stuff. I wouldn't have looked at it as studying. I wouldn't have looked at it as understanding. I was just fascinated by other cultures and other pivotal moments in time that happened before this moment in time that I knew I was experiencing within the record shop, and I had been experiencing from such a young age, and my dad introducing me to Electro 5. There's always something far deeper to study and listen to with music. There's always something far deeper to understand with the history of music, which is why with my channels, why with my social media, I can't tell the world that this certain tune is the first jungle record, because I don't believe there's the first jungle record. I can't share with the world when they think this record's the first drum and bass or the first hardcore or the first breakbeat or the first acid. I can't share in that stuff in the same way I don't believe ever there's a first in music. I always believe that there is way too much depth in music to ever be so shallow or so uneducated that you think something is the first. Creativity does not have a first. Creativity and music and sound and points in history that create this thing, they have all been inspired by other things. We all stand on the land of giants. We've all had things that have happened in decades and times before we was even born, and here that have inspired these magical things that we then become part of. And Woodstock was a massive inspiration to me, as inspiring as being around the Centerforce DJs, the Sunrise DJs, the promoters, you know. So we have to celebrate and understand heritage and history, and if other people haven't learned what you've learned, it's essential to share what you've learned with the world.
So did working in the shop lead you to getting your residency at Labyrinth?
Working in Pool for Music absolutely got my residency in Labyrinth, and basically I was in amongst the earliest forms of East London warehouse acid house culture. So I just want to make people aware of this is what I was around. So Mervyn, who I spoke about, he's the person who named me Billy Bunter when I was 14. My name was going to be Bookham Dano, but there was Danny Bookham on Rain Dance LTJ Bookham, so it was all too close. Labyrinth made me Billy Daniel Bunter. They put the Daniel in. But Mervyn, who named me my name, Mervyn was the first ever DJ to play for Labyrinth in 1988. Mervyn was the first DJ to play for Andy Swaller Centerforce at one of his warehouse parties. And Andy Pritchard, who went on to set up Genesis with Wayne Anthony, the first person Andy ever booked for one of his illegal warehouse parties was Mervyn. So this guy Mervyn was about like early 88. Early 88, at the same time you're hearing about the Shums in the West End and all like the Shums, the Oakenfolds, the Tongs, the West End scene. At the same time you're hearing about that side of things, people like Andy Pritchard, people like Joe Labyrinth, people like Andy Swaller Centerforce, and Mervyn as a DJ amongst some other DJs like Tony Wilson and various others. They're some of the first people to be in the East End doing illegal warehouse rave acid parties, and Mervyn gave me my name. So Joe and Sue lived opposite the record shop, and
that's the people that ran Labyrinth.
Joe and Sue run Labyrinth. Their history, I met them. Mervyn named me late 89. He'd already been DJing for them. I met them early 1990. I was just about to turn 15, right? So Joe and Sue lived in the flats opposite the record shop, smack bang opposite the record shop. You just walk across the road, turn a little bit, and there was their flats over in Whitechapel. And either side of the shop, there was like a hardware shop, and then there was like a shop that would sell meat and food and blah, 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 you know. And I would just be blasting the music out. I'd be blasting all the new music out of the shop, especially in school holidays or before I got thrown out of school. If there was holidays, I'd be in there every day working. By the time I got thrown out of school, I was in there every day. But Sue would walk past the shop and hear all the music I was blaring out. Hear all the music I'm blaring out. One day, Joe Labyrinth comes in the shop and he says, "Hello mate, I'm Joe Labyrinth. Like, me and Sue love all this music you're playing in the shop. Keep it up, mate. Keep it up." And when I say that year of 1989, I still carry the mythology, I still carry the mysticism, I still carry the depth of what I was feeling from the music. I still carry what the music and the youthfulness and the togetherness and the struggle and the fight that people like Joe and Sue had to endure to put on these illegal parties. I was well aware of their history and heritage within that first year and a half, just as I met them. And I'll take my shot, John. I'll say to Joe, Labyrinth, can I play at your club? And just like Dave had said to me, yeah, you can start this weekend. Joe says, you can start this weekend. Joe Labyrinth says to a 15-year-old coming up to 15, turning 15, you can come and play at Labyrinth. All I'd heard about from Mervyn is Labyrinth, Ferry Lane. All I'd heard about is Labyrinth, Silver City, and it was just, you couldn't make it up. I was literally handed the keys to the dream, and it's only been in recent times, as I've reflected on Eamon going, because me and Eamon both worked in the shop, that I've reflected on Labyrinth and what that meant, and Joe getting his name put into the pavement outside where the club is, and my name getting put into a plaque outside there next to Jar Shaka, next to Prodigy, next to Sir Coxon, like, and at 50, coming up to be a granddad, it's all of a sudden dawned on me that, fuck, you lived the dream. Like you were given the keys to the dream, and I probably didn't even realise it was the dream, because the vinyl and the music and my love for discovering everything, I was in a dream anyway.
And you were resident there for what, 5 years?
I was resident at Labyrinth for exactly 5 years. Exactly 5 years. Every Friday and Saturday for 5 solid years. And when I say 5 years solid, I mean never a weekend off. The only time I might take a weekend off is in 1992. My family went to America, to Disney for 2 weeks, and we went. Literally, that was probably the only time I ever had off of that Friday and Saturday night. And me and Joe have calculated it over the years. So imagine, John, minimum 1,000 people every weekend went there. 52 times a year. Friday 500, Saturday 500. But then you've got to take into account the nights where it was overly jammed. And then you've got to take into account the nights where there may have only been 300 people in there. But every Friday and Saturday night, I was given the key to East London's ultimate rave underground playground. And the other thing as well that happened throughout that Friday and Saturday residency, and we need to bring it back to records because you've asked me that question about how long it went on for, was not only was there the Friday and Saturday residency, there was then Every Picture Tells a Story that would happen at Wonderland Arena and Tottenham Sports and Leisure Centre. So they were big one-offs. 92 was Desire 92, Labyrinth 2000 AD. There were 6, 7, 8 of them. There would have been 1,500, 2,000 people outside of the club Friday and Saturday. Then when we moved into 1993, and this, people are going to think, flipping hell, this guy's a bit bold. Labyrinth was the first hardcore jungle rave, because by 93 we had the hardcore and we had the jungle and we had the dark and we had the happy coming through. Labyrinth was the first, what would have been a hardcore rave in Bagleys. And the mad thing about Labyrinth being in Bagleys, it happened 6 or 7 times for like 3,000 people. Imagine this, John. Christmas 1993, Labyrinth did their 4 Aces 12 Dalston Lane regular events. they were bold as fucking brass to do Christmas Day and Boxing Day in Bagley's. Right. And they pulled that off in that time, and it's quite mad, John, because someone interviewed me for an ADHD book, and they were just fascinated by my story of talking about ADHD a lot, and they read my book and they said, you've had ADHD from day dot, and your fascination and your dedication and your one-track mindedness to Labyrinth, you had it then, and it served me so well now.
What was your favourite era of playing at Labyrinth?
So look, Labyrinth, DJing Friday and Saturday night, like, mate, it's hard to believe now when I think back, but it makes me understand why when I do all these so many different posts on the internet. So one moment I could be talking about bleeps and bass, next minute I could be talking about happy hardcore, next minute I can be talking about jungle, next minute I can be talking about 1992 rave anthems, yeah? And what I've come to learn in my life, and especially more recently, where I believe that I can't speak for other DJs and I can't speak for other promoters, but I've dedicated my life to the history of rave music. I've dedicated my life to the golden years of 88 to 94. I've dedicated my life to keeping that spirit, that ethos, that togetherness, that power of this music alive, right? I've dedicated my life to it. And right now, and I'm really grateful for my career. I've done this for 36 years. I've never had to work. I've seen some incredible pinnacles in my life. Like, it's paid for me and my family to live. But right now, this is the most people I've ever seen come out for old school. This is the busiest I've ever been. This is like some of the biggest crowds I've ever seen around, not just the UK, but travelling abroad. And I've never seen such enthusiasm for this. So I've just grown to learn, like, my emotional connection to this music and sharing it with people. And when you think back to 92, 93, all the splits, I just like hardcore. No, but I like jungle. We hate all of that. We like house. I've never liked that. I've always despised it with a passion, because at the same time I discovered acid, I discovered Balearic beats. At the same time I was listening to electro music, I was discovering the Ultimate Breaks and Beats albums for the first time and understanding things. The same time my mum was playing me Motown, my dad was showing me reggae. You know, I can't understand these pigeonholes. And between 1990 and 1995, I watched the rave scene go from these 88, 89 records and this music like Strings of Life, Dion, Come Get My Lovin', Korea, Let Me Love You for Tonight, Renegade Soundwave, The Phantom, The Beat Club, Security, Landlord, I Like It, Unique, Free the Theme. All this variation of music in 88, 89 while learning about William Pitt, City Lights and Belgium new beats and just all of this stuff. And then at the turn of specifically the year 1990, then getting my residency with Joe and Sue every Friday and Saturday, my sets were a hangover of 89 and the new music that started coming through. So I was getting introduced for the first time, Test One, LFO, Ital Rockers, Juno. At the same time, meeting Shut Up and Dance, who were bringing their records around to Pull for Music, meeting DJ Hype, Eon the Spice, like London labels like Vinyl Solution, and I'm meeting these people. They're bringing their music around out of the back of their cars or vans in the year 1990, and the Tam Tam records. So I'm seeing that moment in time where all of a sudden in 1990, Brits from North, south. Brits, of course, have been making house and acid and hip house. We know they have done, you know, and it was all a very American-centric sound. But being in the heart of East London, 1990, the music, the bass-heavy bleeps and bass, so inspired by dub music coming down from Leeds and Sheffield, being in the heart of Whitechapel, literally less than a mile from Hackney. I'm then hearing the breakbeat stuff that's coming through from London. So there's a distinct change in 1990. Toward the end of 1990 into 1991. Just incredible, incredible, incredible bleeps, bass, breaks, music. And it's so hard for me to choose a favourite across those 5 years. But I always, because I watched it all move. So by mid-91, we've got this, the heavy European rave sound coming in. They're getting a more hardcore, the tempos are getting faster, but then what was like the Scientists, Shut Up and Dance, Ital Rockers, LFO kind of sound, the Brits are then merging those two things, beginning to speed them up, and by the end of 1991 we're seeing London breakbeat, rave, hardcore music here. We're like, this is revolutionary, because like, if you was to go Meat Beat, Manifesto, all those northern bleeps and bass people I said, Londoners, if you go that trajectory, it was still the same speed as the Americans had been doing, or the Europeans had been doing. By the end of 91, if you listen to records like Box Bass, or if you listen to Protocol Autoload, which is one of Potential Bad Boys' earliest tunes, like all of a sudden we are getting far faster breakbeat music, and it's really, really, really British and really cutting edge and really experimental. And then going into 1992 is 1992 is where I'd served kind of my 2 years. The whole Labyrinth experience was an apprenticeship. Like the way I am now on stage, in clubs, on the mic, that was all learnt from that 5 years at Labyrinth. That's the definition of my style and who I am. 1992 is literally where I'd gone from doing first hour, first 2 hours, first 3 hours, being allowed to do the first 3 hours, to then maybe playing a later slot. And I'd worked for all these times, started picking up the mic, copying Adrian Age, copying Vinyl Matt. And then something happened in 1992, Desire 92, Tasco Warehouse. Tasco Warehouse was an amazing warehouse venue over South London. And I got there and Sue said to me, "You're playing last tonight, Dan." I went, "What?" Like that's Adrian's spot. Everyone's asking you for last. Like everyone wants you last, right? And I've scrutinised it within my life, and I realised that my age, I'd grown into this British-centric sound in 1992. It suited me. I'd had DJ experience by that point, but not just that, John. When I was 15, a few years previous, I was really fucking young, and this was the scene that had followed on from '89. And if you look at videos of Labyrinth from the Four Aces in 1991, or the early events at Wonderland Arena, the crowd is older. The crowd is like a 25, 30-year-old crowd, and I'm 15, right? But by the time it got to 1992, that crowd had moved away. They'd already been raving from 88, 89, 90, followed Labyrinth, and then they'd gone. We was in a new era by 92. 1992 was a total new era, and also the crowds that were going to events like Desire and Labyrinth were younger. And even though I was still only 17, a lot of people now coming are 18 and 20. So I'm of them now. Previously, I was like the timid lad learning my thing, and for me and Labyrinth, that was a new era for me and Labyrinth. That was a new era for what we did. And then you move into 93 and it rapidly changes again. It like, you move into 1993 and all of a sudden towards the end of 92, we're getting like Sacred, Do It Together, we're getting Doc Scott, NHS, we're getting Nookie Music. Mate, you could go on and on, you could go down the records down there and you could go on and on and on and on and on. But it's getting faster. I think we even see some Mike Slammers and Red Alerts towards the end of 92. You know, things were, mate, we went into 92 still playing records from the end of 91 that were feeling fast, like 130, 135. By the time of the summer, we're 140. By the end of 1992, we are literally, we have some 150 tunes, 155 tunes at the end of 92. Then we go into 93. Then we go into 93 and it starts getting faster again. But then there's just this, all of the sudden, there's this really dark, underground music, like dark. When I think of Chill Out, Focus, when I think of some of the stuff Reinforced were doing, when I think of some of the stuff Third Party were doing. So you'd have that, but then on the other end of it, like I say, the slamming vinyls, the SMDs, Ramos and Supreme started emerging through. You'd have people still doing piano tunes. And there was these two distinct sounds, but throughout 1993, they coexisted together. Because it was no different to in 1991 playing Bizarre Inc., playing with knives and everyone putting their hands in the air, but then playing something from Beltram or one of those tunes where everyone was screw facing the, you know, those gurning records. And in 1993, that still coexisted. That as a DJ in a set, you could play the dark, you could play the light, you could play all of this music. Then 1994 comes, and that's it. People are jungle DJs, or they're happy hardcore DJs, or some have just left and they're house DJs by this point. And there was a point throughout 1994 in the Labyrinth where I was still playing Third Party record. MB, Rank Records. There was Congo Natty stuff, some of the Chrome and Time stuff on Tearing Vinyl. There was a point in time where we could still play that with the music that Vibes was giving me, the music that Ramos and Supreme was giving me, the music that Slipmat was giving me, the music that Just Another Label was giving me. There was a period in 1994 where they could still coexist, but they got to a point toward the end where it was like...
Right, okay, let's move on. How many records have you got in your collection?
Right, so when we was over dinner, me, you and Sonia were talking about this, wasn't we? And at the moment, if we take all of the sevens, all of the records here, all of these records, more 12 inches there, more singles here, it's 8,000 to 10,000 records. There's been times in and out of my life where we've had all of these in here. We've had records looking very nice, might I add, around the living room, well done. We've had far more records in and out of this house. At most, we've had like 25,000 records. But as I've got older, I do think, do I need it all? I've been down so many roads of discovery with soul, funk, reggae, boogie, disco, tracing electronica back to like the late 60s, early 70s, being hell-bent on being a completist on certain artists and labels, and what I've learned to do now within my record collecting and within my record collection, I've got this wall over here and all that's on the floor behind you, John. What is it, 2,000 couple of thousand? It is absolutely the heartbeat of my radio shows, my live sets if I get vinyl sets, my inspirations, and that is what I work around. When there's so many records here, so many records there, I don't feel emotionally attached to these ones. They're just hordes of records to learn from. It's all about my emotional attachment to records. I'm not as I was in previous decades where I've got to have more, stack, build.
So how are they organised, Dan? Can you find, if you needed to find a record, can you find it?
The records I can emotionally go to, I can find immediately. How I catalogue records is first and foremost, and these are all over the place now. These are all over the place, but my emotional selection, and I've always catalogued them like this. So it goes by genre, and it always goes back to what is the oldest record in that genre. What is the oldest record in that genre? So if you go through my 7 inches, you could probably go back to 1947, some quick time jazz and stuff, and it will always start with that genre and the earliest record, and then so whatever that artist is, I then gather every record that I own from that artist. So they could have a record in 88, a record in 92, a record in 2001, but that artist will all go together at that starting point of the year in the genre. Of course, some artists delve off into other genres, but I'll always keep them together. So over the years, we've gone to say jazz. It could go jazz. So then you have a selection of jazz, and it goes back to the earliest record, the oldest record, and then artist by artist and year by year, and it's always catalogued. So if an artist first comes out, so take my hip hop, so if you was to take Mantronix, first record 1985, Mantronix, his first entry in the hip hop and the electro is in the year 1985, but then every Mantronix record will be there. Cool. And my reggae, my rock, my pop. I love pop. How can I not love pop? My soul, funk, disco, boogie, hip hop, rap, go-go. I'm a big fan of go-go. P-Funk is been one of my biggest passions. I own every single George Clinton, Parliament, Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins album. I wonder if you can see him there. But my absolute DJ music, so if Clockwork Orange say to me this year, I'm doing a 2-hour set at S Paradise, strictly vinyl. It's a 2-hour strictly vinyl set. My DJ music that I take out isn't catalogued through, so if I take 2 big boxes of records, they're not catalogued in year and artist. They're catalogued through how I would warm up a set, how I would build a set, records, set pieces that I know mix amazingly, where I would want to end a set, and I'm very good with BPMs after all these years. I was terrible at mixing in the early days, and it's all very vibe based. So for my vinyl sets, it's catalogued through tempo, warm up, build up, peak time, etc. So my hoarding is very, very organised, but this room's a very working room. Radio show, live streams, deep dives, practicing, giving people content. So it's a mess. There's also a lot of fucking mess. A lot of mess. There's a lot of mess.
Going back to, you were talking about Mantronix. You showed me a little 7-inch single earlier, which was a real rare Mantronix thing, didn't you?
John, how have you remembered that, you absolute vinyl flipping geek?
Let's have a look at that, because I couldn't even find it on Discogs.
So I wonder if Johnny Scratch has replied to me. So, right, so Johnny Scratch, I'm a geek. I'm a really passionate geek. My friend Johnny Scratch, and I'm in a group of people, not a musical group, but vinyl geeks. Me, Johnny Scratch, Ritchie K, who's been on John's channel, and Original Gidman. And we just marvel over records, and we trace back time, and as far tracing back when this musical instrument was first ever used, and when this piece of like electronic equipment was first ever used, and we go really in, and it's a lot of stuff that I probably would never share to the rave dance music world, but at some point in my life it will become incredibly useful to add into something that I share with the world. And we're big hip-hop fans, and Johnny Scratch, who's, I'm going to be as bold to say that he is the most fascinating electro music collector that I've ever met in my life. I'm just in awe of the way he has honed in on just electro music from the 80s. And he's a big Mantronix fan, and this particular piece, the actual singles in it, separately, are not worth much, to be fair. However, I have no idea how I acquired this 7-inch double pack. It has a catalogue number, it has a barcode. You will not find this on Discogs, you will not find this anywhere. And Johnny Scratch has asked me in the past, do you want to do a trade-off with that? What we're going to swap that for? And I'm reluctant to. I'm a big Mantronix fan, but I'm incredibly reluctant to let this off because I have no idea what it means to the world. How I've acquired this thing that the greatest electro collector that I've ever met doesn't know it. I'm well happy you've remembered that, John, because I've forgotten all about that.
All right, well, let's stay on the electro subject. You mentioned earlier that it was your obsession that you wanted to get every single 12-inch off of all the electro albums.
Yes.
So did you accomplish that?
Yeah. So my thing was, so at the age of 10, 11, 12 years of age, when these electro albums were first coming out, my dad's new to this, my dad's hearing Electro 5 and showing me as a child, him like me, his first experience of a specialist black music record shop is Music Power, taking me in there. So we would not have had the experience, nor the money, nor the know-how, how to acquire every single 12-inch single that was featured on these albums, because they were at large all imports. Now and again, like on Electro 11, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Butt Naked, that was only ever an album track, right? An import was $8.99 or $12.99, an import album, LP. So there was never any reason for us to be able to acquire all these records, because you had these albums and that was the buzz, the buzz. And as I got older and older, I wanted to know what they all looked like. I wanted to know what the sound of my upbringing, the backbone to my life, the music that had given me this amazing life and career and taken me all over the world. I wanted to know what all of these records looked like, John. I had to know, and I wanted to know what the dub mixes were. And it started, I would say it started 20 years ago, 22 years ago. I'd owned various records, of course I had. Most people who were into these albums, who are into records or were DJs, they'd own Hashim, they'd own Planet Rock, you'd own various Captain Rock records, you'd own UTFO, Houdini, of course you did. but there's loads of rare ones as well. There's loads of ones that are harder to collect, and I just wanted them. And my initial spark with it was going every Sunday morning to car boots all over North London. Sunday morning, car boots. You go back to my social media in the past 18 years, I think Facebook's 18 years or 17 years old, you will find continual amounts of pictures of me car booting. And that was only ever to look for electro tracks from these, because 18 years ago there wasn't many record shops about, you know, in the way that there was now, because most had fallen off. You know, there was Reckless, Alan's Records over in Finchley was a big source for me of beginning to acquire them, picking up various bits from America on Discogs. I would regularly DJ over in Holland, Amsterdam, and I discovered a record shop called Waxwell who had many of them. But for a good, like any collector will know, certain things elude you, right? There's certain things that elude you. I know Tom and Jerry eludes you, John, and many other people. And that's what some of these electros become to me. Star Raid.
So did you get them all in the end?
Oh, I've got every single one, John. I become obsessive, like going to wherever I would go abroad to DJ, Canada, New York, Amsterdam. I'm hunting. I'm getting. Soon as something would come up, a lot of it, like rave records, are easy to get. £3, £5. But it's when those £100, £150, £200 come along that it becomes harder. And the two that eluded me was Awesome Foursome, Monster Beat, and Star Raid 19th Fleet. And always, there's some electro gatekeeper who's 10, 15 years older than me. He's just an happy hardcore DJ. He's just a rave DJ. He don't know about that music, right? There's my Star Raid.
How much did that cost you?
I think about 200 quid during COVID.
And what was the other one? The Awesome Foursome?
Oh yeah, I got that. And do you know it's a killer, John? Do you know it's an absolute killer? I did, again, hyper focus and sharing your passions. There's a Street Sounds Electro group. Actually, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind, right? So there's a Street Sounds Electro group, and Morgan Carr, you know, Street Sounds is Morgan Carnes. And during COVID, I did radio shows every single day, as you know. And Awesome Foursome and Star Raid had eluded me. And I did this show where I asked the members of Street Sounds, can you all give me your top 3 records, tracks that ever featured on the Electro albums? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people gave me their top 3s in this post, right? And I collated it all. And we did a top 60. And the only 2 I couldn't play was Monster Beat and Star Raid, because I hadn't acquired them yet. I completely hadn't acquired them yet. So there's this show that's on my Sound Mixcloud that has got this top 60 compiled by fans of Street Sounds that hasn't got those 2 tunes on. That was at the very start of COVID. We all spent a fortune on records in COVID, right? And Star Raid was non-existent. Awesome. Monster Beat was slightly easier to get hold of. There was 1 or 2 in the world. I think it was like 150 quid. Now, like a lot of things, it's gone down a bit. And one morning, it was like 2, 3 in the morning, I've woken up to go for a wee-wee, looked at Discogs while drive Sonia insane. Why are you having a wee while you're on the phone? I'm looking at Discogs, right? And Star Raid's come up, about 200 quid. I've just fucking brought it, ain't I? I've just Sonia! Normally that happens when something exciting happens, or what was I doing earlier when I lost Star Rage on? I was going, I can't exactly call Sonia because I'm the one who's lost it. She never loses anything, I lose everything. But the woman's the first person you call, right? But I've brought it. I've gone, bam. I've gone to bed one happy man, thinking, right, I've secured my Star Raid. I've secured my Star Raid. Go to bed blissfully happy. I wake up, this guy's got a 50% fucking rating. I've just given him 200 quid, John. I've just given this guy 200 fucking quid and he's got 50% right ratings. Some people are going, brilliant seller, not a problem in the world, really slow, never want to deal with this guy again, records never turn up. Oh no. Sonia don't mind. Sonia's happy for me to buy records. It's when I waste money. She's not happy with me. And I'm just thinking, wow. And I stayed in touch with this. Actually, this guy had some other rares, right? So I've done a deal with him on these rares. And I've actually taken a leap of faith and it just worked out better with shipping from America. It took about 4 months for him to get here, John. I was just every day like a sick puppy at the door, waggling my tail, hoping that it was them records. And they eventually come and Star Raid was there and it was complete. And it was like, I did it. I absolutely did it.
Is that the most you've ever spent on a record?
Listen, £200 is the most I've ever spent on a record. You know, collectors of, especially soul and funk collectors, people who have like sold me record collections. I've had no problems with 4 or 5 grand on a collection. We're all like that, you know. But there's no record out there that is in like £600, £700, £800 that I want. Like, I'm sure if there was, I might do it. Do you know what I mean? But in my series of electro records, in my P-Funk collection, in my ultimate breaks and beats albums, in the things that I am most completist about, I've been very fortunate that there hasn't been records that are £300, £400, £500.
Right, okay, so let's talk about your essential breakbeats collection.
Right, the ultimate breaks and beats albums.
You've got them all?
I've got every single ultimate breaks and beats albums.
And don't tell me you've got every record that was sampled.
No, I haven't. But no, actually, John, as you know, earlier on I showed you a really cool box of 7 inches that is like many of the original presses that are featured on these. But I'm not a completist with that. It's merely stuff that I absolutely love. But here, these are all the ultimate breaks and beats that had a really cool record sleeves on, yeah? So they had these really distinct artwork,
That one's quite famous, that one.
Yeah, very famous. This is the one that introduced the world to Amon Brother, basically.
Yeah.
And then up there was about another 10 or 15 that were just in house bags, in disco sleeves, right? And these are, I'm going to say that these are the second generation in the history of breakbeats, right? But these being the second generation in the history of breakbeat and breakbeat becoming so predominant in hip hop first and then into our world. These are the second generation and the most influential part of the journey of breakbeat culture as time's gone on. Because the first generation is those DJs of the mid to late 70s who were using the breaks. Although you can go even further back, many would say than even Cool Herc with King Disco, Mario and people using these beats. But these albums ultimately by Breakbeat Lou, they took and understood those sacred records and those unknown records and those things that people wouldn't distinctively know that DJs had been discovering, and pulled them together and made compilations out of these records from the 60s and 70s. And anyone with an interest in studying trajectories of music need to understand that in 79, 80, 81, pretty much by 82 it disappeared. Hip-hop music, the beats were played by live drummers, live musicians. A lot of the time it was cover versions of big disco beats. So it was live. A lot of the backbone of the very early rap is live. Once the drum machines had come in, you listen to every underground hip-hop electro record to the commercial stuff of Houdini, Run DMC, the Fat Boys, that era, all drum machine based drums. Now, when these start dropping around 85, all of the sudden, Marley Marl, Sed G from Ultramagnetic MCs, Herbie Lovebug, who produced Kid and Play and Salt and Pepper, they start getting their hands on these albums. Then hip-hop changes from the drum beats to all of a sudden you're hearing break beats. Now by the time house and rave starts using break beats, 89, 90, at large they're sampling the hip-hop records that had these beats. But some producers most certainly would have been getting their hands on these. And for me personally, I feel it's essential for me as a music lover, as a historian, as someone who throughout the mid-80s were fascinated with how hip-hop changed, someone who was thrown into the world of house and bleeps and bass and rave in 1990 when breakbeats were hardly being used, to then see them become such a predominant part of the makeup of 92, 93, 94 music. I just found that I wanted to own these albums because they play such a pivotal moment in the evolution of all of the music we love. And I just want to add a side note that Salt and Pepper, of all people, I Desire, is probably the first record we ever hear using the Amen breakbeat outside of the original Winston track. And people always say, but NWA, but that was 3-4 years later. Mantronix, incidentally, and again, Mantronix, I could never have believed in a million years that I would break down Mantronix, King of the Beats, and basically say this record, which uses the Amen but uses many other breaks, would have been influenced by the Ultimate Breaks and Beats albums. Mantronix would have taken all of his beats from these albums, and I explained the story on on Instagram, what I've just explained to you. Mantronix, I've got every one of his records there. Comes underneath the video and says, "You're right, man. Like, I sampled all of these beats from these albums because my mind tells me that these young 20-year-old men in 85, 86, 87 wouldn't have had complete access to all of these beats and have known what they've known and blah, 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 blah. And as I've studied, as I've learned, as I've realised, as I've listened, these albums are pivotal to breakbeats in hip-hop that in turn were pivotal to those hip-hop records being sampled in rave. And these are important These are really fucking important.
Okay, so let's talk about records that you've made. What was the very first record you ever made?
The very first record I ever made, 1993, and I've just written on it, unreleased, Mr. South, Gem and Bunter. Gem is the singer to One Tribe, What Have You Done? Gem married my friend Roger, Mr. South, in '93. I was usher at their wedding actually, and they wanted to make a record with me. They were older than me. As my friends, they were pushing me in '93. You've got this residency, you need to make music, everyone's making music. I didn't want to make music, I wanted to DJ music. Making music was not a plan. I'm a DJ. Labyrinth. Don't want to know, right? But they pushed me into this thing, and I'm going to tell you something, right? I'm going to tell you something. They hired this travelling studio by a group called A. And A went on to have some notoriety in rock music on MTV and had some minor hits. Last week, I got delivered an advert from Kerrang magazine. You know, like your algorithm just finds you, doesn't it? Kerrang, and it said A are back. Celebrated underground rock band from the 90s, and I looked and it was them, because at the time when they made this tune with me, Roger and Diane, they also, and I've just remembered something else I was going to tell you, they also, Roger was sound man for Eskimo Noise, who was doing the sound system at Labyrinth and the sound system at AWOL. When we made this tune, Roger got these guys a job doing the sound system at AWOL and Labyrinth. They were two twin brothers. I'm looking at this picture of Kerrang. It's fucking them, John. They're back with an album. I haven't seen these dudes since 1993, and anyone who's steeped in history, who loved the sound system at AWOL or loved the sound system at Labyrinth, Mr. South, who I did that with, and A worked under Mr. South doing the sound for AWOL and Labyrinth, and they went on to be a rock band, and this rock band have got a new album coming out, but it's fucking terrible. It's absolutely, I think it's got a great story to it, but it is absolutely fucking terrible. Roger, Mr. South, is probably going to message me and say, why did you say that about our tune? Roger, we never released it, mate. It's fucking terrible. And the dub plate is pretty clean, actually.
It's because you never played it.
Yeah, no. And I've actually said to Pete Cannon, there is some bits in here that we could take, right? It's techno-y. There's bits of really like poorly emulated Ron Wells stuff that are just like, there's some vocals that are like, there's some rap. It's all just, it's like, but it's a genuine story of like my first record made, which I didn't like the experience, and I just kind of went back to my thing's a DJ. I'm a DJ, mate.
So what was the first record that you made that actually got released?
These ones are easy to find. Now I'm not going to find it, am I? Oh, right. You recording?
Yeah.
For the purpose, why do I keep saying this? For the purpose of John's video, John, I'm fucking frustrated, aren't I? Behind me, I said I start my genres with year and artist, right? At the very bottom of this shelf, which incidentally I said was the shelf that I wasn't emotionally attached to, is all of the records that I've ever produced. And by like literally behind me on the floor should be the dub plate of my first ever release, Let It Lift You, the white label of my first ever release, Let It Lift You, and the finished copy of my first ever record, Let It Lift You. And I'm frustrated because I can't find it. And now I'm annoyed because I want to show it to you all, but that was my first ever release that come out.
Billy Daniel Bunter and JDS, right?
Billy Daniel Bunter and JDS, Joel, Darren, Sat, just another label featuring Jem, who sung on that, who sung One Tribe, What Have You Done, engineered by Matt Optical of Optical and Ed Rush.
While we're on the subject of happy hardcore, what was the key records that started it?
Key records in the early days of happy hardcore, and I think there's so many nuances and different things that you could say is happy hardcore, is SMD happy hardcore compared to Hixie and Sharky Toy Town being happy hardcore. Is Hixie and Sharky Toy Town happy hardcore compared to Force and Styles Heart of Gold that come later? So there's so many of these sort of opinions that people have as to being happy hardcore. But for me, the records that started really changing it in the same way that the darker jungle drum and bass sound had records that started changing it, I think undoubtedly, and I've only got the white label here, is Fat Controller, Incomplete Darkness. That started becoming a distinct change in a bit of 4/4, Amon, slightly speeding up a bit. SMD 1, most certainly it started getting that more of a kick drum to it, more of a direct arrangement, continually doing something. You're going to put your hands in the air to this, you're going to do your hands like this to this bit, you're going to mix out that bit. It had all the elements to it, and these are all 93 really, but it then led into the next bit. But these are most certainly catalysts that at the time they were records that really stood out. I think that slamming vinyl have to have a humongous big up. This one is Red Alert and Mike Slammer, Don't Need Your Love and In Effect. And I think in equal measures that Mike and Grant slamming need massive love is also Vibes and Wish Doctor. Also when Vibes and Dougal would collaborate, they seem to just capture it. And also Ramos Supreme and Sunset Regime. The journey for me was as good as LTJ Bookham music, and I've said it countless amounts of times in interviews that at the time Bookham did music was at the time that Ramos Supreme and Sunset Regime did The Journey. The classiness of The Journey, the pianos, the euphoric rush without it being a cheesy rush was the sign of things to come. And when that dropped, like, that was the ultimate 5:30 tune. That was the ultimate last tune at Labyrinth in that 93 era, in the same way that Bookham music at the same time, you'd use it to start your set down there at the Labyrinth. And this was a really fucking exciting time for me, because it was sort of like leading up to me making Let It Lift You, which changed the trajectory. It took me out of London and took me all over the UK after being in London for 5 years. But this was really exciting for me when records like The Journey dropped, when records like Incomplete Darkness dropped. There was just certain tunes that when they drop, it was like, oh, these are good. These are really good. And throughout 94, it held it. It held that thing. And I think I said earlier that you could mix a Chrome and Time license and that with a Vibes tune. You know, you could mix this stuff up And but by 95, especially by 96, it was a completely different thing. It was ultimately, it was a really fun thing. It was but if you remember back, John, that's when I started. And you was on our label. John was on our label. We started doing a much progressive, more experimental sound with the trancecore, with the hardcore, because the 96 stuff, it didn't excite me as much as those records. If I could pinpoint, and this is bigging up Ramos Supreme and Sunset Regime again, if we take what then become the sound of, say, 96, 97 with Force and Styles, Heart of Gold, that kind of era, Shooting Star, which is a completely different happy hardcore to that stuff. If I was to take the one record that, when you look back now, is glaringly obvious in 93, and that's Ramos Supreme and Sunset Regime, Sunshine. It had like a Euro-y feel, it had a full vocal, it had a bit more of a kick drum to it. It was very different to SMD. It was very different to Incomplete Darkness. It was very different to Mike Slammer and Red Alert. And that era, that 93, 94 era of those records is not to be underestimated. It had some incredible records. And for me, by the end of 94, going into 95, that's when, you know, jungle drum and bass really did go that way. Hardcore, happy hardcore really did go that way. and that was a completely different time. That was a completely different time for me, because up to making Let It Lift You, I'd played all of this different music week in, week out. Then Let It Lift You come, John. And my name wasn't on records. I didn't have tapes out there. All of a sudden, I still lived at home with my mum. Sonia had just moved in. Jack was just born. He was like a few months old after when that record come out. And all of a sudden, people were ringing up Just Another Label saying, who's this Billy Daniel Bunter? Can we book him? You know, because previously in London, everyone knew who I was. I held this residency that is timeless, that holds its place in history for me and Joe, right? But all of a sudden, people from Doncaster ain't got a fucking clue who I am. People, you know what I mean? People in your neck of the woods ain't got a clue. I'm DJing with you for the first time. No one knows who I am, but this record meant that everyone was like, who is this geezer? Who is this geezer? And by the time I ventured out of East and North London and my first times on the motorways and all that, it was a completely different world for me, a completely different life.
I want you to tell me about the monthly geek shows you do with Ritchie K, and what is the reasoning behind you doing that? Right,
the monthly Geek-Outs, the Geek Squad, we are proud to be geeks. I'm a real stickler for histories. I'm a real stickler for going deeper in on where things go. I'm a real stickler for going against the crowd. And I'm a real stickler for hopefully showing people things that they didn't know. And that could be unwittingly showing some, like when I've had Questlove from the Roots and various drum and bass jungle legends and house music legends from around the world come underneath my post and go, we didn't know that. And people who are like legendary spearheading figures phoning me up going, Bunter, that record you were just talking about, could you send it to me? But I never knew that existed. That kind of thing, right? So I'm a real stickler for not following. If everyone's doing represses, I want to make people aware of some records that probably will never get repressed that I also think you should know. I have 2 radio shows a week. I have coming up to 1 million followers across all of my pages. I get millions of views a month across my pages. And I just have a platform that revolves 24/7 around the clock, even if I'm not doing nothing. And I just want to share as much as I share the biggest anthems at the biggest old school raves across the UK, I want to share the really fucking rarest shit that I once played or once sold in a record shop, or I might have only just discovered at the age of 50. So Ritchie K, whose book is out on mine and Sonia's Music Mondays book publishing company. Ritchie K is one of my closest friends, as is Original Gidman, right? So we just delve into music, and I've said to Rich, I think we need to do a monthly show that unearths rares that may be £3, maybe 30 quid, maybe a quid, maybe 50 quid. But I want to show the world through me and you. Gidman's much more private. Gidman, you're pulling by the Ritchie strings, right? And all three of us just really go in and we do these shows. And the idea of the shows is to say, a perfect example is Ritchie found a Eddy unique free tune, second track B-side, and said, everyone, there's 10 of these in the world for sale. They're only $4.99. Bam. All 10 went throughout the show. So we've alerted our followers, our people, that there is really great records that are better than the 150 quid ones that you think you want, right? So it's just a great way for me and John Brent, Original Gidman, and Ritchie K to geek out and just share what we've done, because there is amazing records. And do you know what's mad, John? Oh, the internet. So I shared, and I've done this many times, where Discogs have a weekly chart at the end of each week that shows you what's been the biggest seller. And countless times I've pushed a record that has gone and sold 30, 40, 50, 80 copies in the Discog space, right? So many times we've looked back at that week's mail out saying these are the biggest sellers, and lo and behold, number 1 or 5 or 10 is something that I've pushed that week on my Instagram or on my radio shows. My favourite one of all time was Monday Oliver Stay Close, the Mr. Fingers remix, Larry Heard. It was like a £1-2 record, but it's such a soulful, soul-stirring house record from '89. And Discogs did about 90 that week, and I was so proud because this record had lived with me forever. But the mad thing is, I did this video where I played the second track B-side of Carl Cox's I Want You Forever. My Discog shop hasn't been open for a long time. I'm too busy to buy and sell records. It used to be like a therapeutic pastime. So, it's like sell records, buy more, sell records, buy more. It's a pastime, but I just haven't had time. So I did this deep dive into 2 B-sides that I think everyone should own. And one of them was New Atlantic, Satan, which you reissued. And one of them was Hardcore Massive, which was the second track B-side on Carl Cox, I Want You Forever. And I basically just said, sometimes there is amazing records tucked away on the B-side. And in the case of this Carl Cox one, you can get it for 8 to 10 quid. We know it was a chart record for the A-side. It's like, John, all of a sudden it sold loads of copies. 1 or 2 chances then go, flipping hell, this is selling, this is 50 quid now. I go into one of them Facebook groups and I'm getting the blame. Billy Bunter's just using Discogs like the stock market to raise the price of these records for his own good. How, you fuckwit? I'm sharing music with people who are passionate about this music like I am and saying, guys, if you don't know this, go and get it for a £5. And for some reason, I was the evil vinyl baron for playing the Discogs market like a stock exchange because I can for my own monetary gain. And all I'm doing is making people aware of these amazing records that they probably didn't know existed were on a B-side.
Cool. So you've actually helped me a few times with selling records that I've released by doing a video. So Tell us about your process for how you make social media content to help people sell their records.
Do you want the long answer or do you want the short answer?
The short one.
No way can I give you a short answer, you shit. Right?
Medium.
There can't be middle or medium. Right. Let's just be brutally honest here, right? I see these memes where DJ in the 90s, 100% DJ. DJ in 2026, 1% DJ, 99% social media. We see it, right? We see people complaining that they've got to use social media. I think them memes, and I think those artists who are complaining about social media and saying how different it was in the 90s are fucking insulting us people for the 90s. Because if you think in the 90s, we didn't do tapes to give to people, we didn't go illegally and do pirate radio and get chased by police and people with fucking needles in their arms at the top of a flat in fucking Hackney, or me and Sonia getting stuck in a fucking flat in Hackney, or we didn't go all around London and the outskirts and maybe even travel somewhere else to spend hundreds of pounds on records, give out flyers for events we're playing at. If you think that we just fucking DJ'd in the 90s, you're fucking insulting us. And if you're an old school DJ from back in the day who didn't quite make it, spent your time in no man's land, come back post-COVID and now you've got a bit of a career and you're moaning about fucking the internet, you're insulting the art of pushing, sharing and giving people music and taste making your passions. So I don't go around giving out flyers anymore. I can do it through the internet. I don't go around doing pirate radio adverts anymore that are getting played all over London on the radio. I do it on the internet. Do I go record shopping? Of course I do. Right? Now, our job as DJs, our job as music lovers, our job as people who can put the most amazing underground music, old and new, in front of people's faces, we do it. And we do it with passion and we do it with pride and we don't fucking moan about doing it. So, if I walk into a club like I used to and have always done every weekend of my life, my job is to entertain. Whether it's a big massive stage or an underground club, I've got to capture that vibe. What a joyous life I have. Back in the day, I couldn't be on pirate radio 24/7 around the clock, but now we can be on the internet 24/7 around the clock. So, Vinyl Junkie, he knows there's no rhyme or reason to how I push a tune. T-Cuts, Pete Cannon, SETI, right? Intercord, no, right? Strange Rollers, all of the people you see me push music from, they know that there's no rhyme or reason to how I do this. I get sent a record. Vinyl Junkie's record could sit there for 3 or 4 weeks. Intercore's record could sit there for 3 or 4 weeks. Vibes' new record or whatever, right? Music is a vibe. Music is a passion. Music is something that we share with the world. So I can be out in this room. I can catch a vibe from one of John's tunes. I can go on the internet and share. So John knows. John's been a collab with me where we've had posts that have done 500,000 views. 1 million views on DSKF on my page, right? I catch a vibe. No different to catching a vibe on pirate radio. No different to going out and handing out flyers to where you're DJing. No different to sharing music via tape and tape packs. I've caught a vibe. Everyone, you've got to hear fucking Vinyl Junkie's new tune. It captures me. I've built up a great following. I've done this relentlessly for 36 years of my life. I never fell out. I never moaned because a promoter knocked me money. I never moaned because I didn't get on with some label and that's it, the record industry did it. That's life. As you get older, you learn how to deal with things and like get over things. But my story isn't one of like, I've fucking given up 1,000,001 times and this thing owes me something. No, I owe this thing something. I owe this music everything I can give it. I owe everyone who's ever danced in front of me everyone who's ever liked or commented on my post. I owe this music something, right? So if I go and say, I fucking love this new release on Ghetto Wax, or I love this new record on Warehouse Wax, or I love this new record that N4 Pete Cannon's just released. It's not because they're my friends, because if they give me a tune I'm not feeling, I ain't doing it. And I do it. And I guide people in the same way that back in the day at Labyrinth, I could play a record 5 months ago, no one reacted to it, and then 5 months later it's the end of the night anthem. It's the same thing, and people hear me play that music on the internet, then they come out to the clubs and they know what they're getting from me. And my friends, and even artists who I haven't got to know yet, I could go, you've got to buy this record. My friends have sold 50, 100, 150, 500. Some of my mates have flipping repressed twice on tunes. So what do I think of the internet and why I do it? I fucking love it like I love pirate radio. I love it like I love playing out. I love it like I used to stand outside clubs giving out flyers. I love it like I used to have to make tapes and show people my music that way. The internet is as good and bad as you want to make it. This music is fraught with people who stayed up there. It's fraught with people who didn't get nowhere. And it's plain and simple. This music owes us nothing. This music owes no one nothing. We owe the world the gift of this music to be able to play it to them. And that's what the internet gives us. And I've been so proud when my friends say to me, oh, damn, we lost a bit of money on that. And then you did that video. We weren't expecting it and we sold out. And that's what it's all about, making people aware. We love getting a record in the post. We love hearing music we didn't know about. We love, like, do you know what? Do you know what I love? If I'm playing a tune via my social media, then I play it on one of my radio shows. And the amount of time you've seen it, John, where people go, I hope you're going to play that at Ramsgate Musical. I hope you'll play that at Amnesia House. Da, da, da. And people get in tune to what you're doing. So they get in tune to the underground stuff. They get in tune to the big anthems. And we're tastemakers, we're educators, we're entertainers. And our job is to share this music, and the internet allows us to share this music 24/7.
Tell us about the rave story, and why did you start the rave story, and what effects do you think the rave story's had?
As you can probably tell, I haven't really got too much to say. Right? So the rave story, like you, John, musically, I've dedicated my life to old school music and those magic years. And, you know, like I say, I was steeped and well aware of the heritage and the history that I was surrounded by in 1989. When I released my book, and then that afforded to fund other people's books, I realised that at that point in time, which was 12 years ago, so if we say 1988 to this point, 2026, is 38 years down the line, 12 years ago is 26 years down the line, yeah? Is my maths correct there? Yeah. And it's like, wow, how did we come this far? Like, to now say we're even further down the line with this heritage and history. And I'd started like telling stories like phone box stories and being 15 years of age and playing in these Land of Giants and Channel 4, and some certain people started like dotting themselves around certain people to interview us about London and about this scene. And I just got this inkling to write the book, and it was when I was a pisshead, when I was an absolute out of control pisshead, and my brain was in almost like a comedic mood so much of the time, and I just kept thinking back to some of the things me and my dad got up to, and just things that happened. And I was like, fuck me, I want to tell people this. And I got a run of really good interviews in like a lot of the sort of like trendy magazines at the time. And we had a press team, and I had this run of interviews one day, and the place that the press agency chose, they thought it'd be a good idea to go to Dalston. Dalston, by that point, 12 years ago, the flats were built that are now named after Labyrinth. What was Labyrinth was knocked down and turned into a library. Actually, in the library is all pictures of us lot, where people used to get held up at knife point and their cars robbed. These now coffee shops, coffee's 6-8 quid. And these youngsters who were 25, 30-year-old journalists come to interview me, and I was telling them about the area. I was telling them about, you know, how hardcore come about, how jungle come about, how we come out of the 88, 89 rave scene, and then London in early 1990 had clubs like Labyrinth and Telepathy and AWOL and Rage and Orange and all these things. But when I was explaining the landscape of how different, they were not fathoming it. And also at that point, there wasn't many record shops that had opened. Now there's just so many record shops. And I was telling them, like, there was Black Market, there was Wired for Sound, there was Red Records, there was Bluebird Records, there was Unity Records, there was Music Power Records, there was all these and these youngsters, what? Like, and I just come home and I was buzzing, and I was saying to Son, like, we need to do something. The books ain't enough. Like the books are not enough for us to do. And I want to do this thing called, and I just had the concept, the rave story, where I wanted to do, replicate a record shop, replicate a bedroom, have talks with the legends of the scene, from Dave Elter Skelter to LSD, Groove Rider and Fabio, Joe Labyrinth, Eastman. I just Mickey Finn. Kenny. I just wanted these people to tell the world, like tell this new world that was in Dalston, Shoreditch, blah 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 blah. And then as it was more than that. It wasn't just about showing a new generation. It was also about celebrating it with our generation. And we took up situ in at the Aquarium in Old Street, Shoreditch, and it run every day. We'd do it. It'd go from Monday to Saturday, or Monday to Friday, and it would be art gallery, record fair, seminars, end of week rave, all different talks, flyer swapping, flyer walls, and it was just magic. And it was like, and I remember the first night when we opened, me and Sonia was on the train. We picked up the metro after the second day, and they'd done this bit about us, like everyone needs to descend onto the Aquarium. The rave stories there all week. The following day, with no press team, no nothing, ITV News come down and interviewed me and Sonia about it all, and it was like the word had got out, and the fascination was brilliant, and it was just born out of like wanting to show youngsters what our life was like, and also pay homage to not just the people who DJs, promoters, producers, but the ravers. The people who live, like when people would walk around the Aquarium and see all these flyers, and people who had unearthed pictures that no one had ever seen, and like the joy on people's faces. That, like, you think then, there was, when we set that up 10 years ago, the book was, first book was 11, 12 years ago. So the 50, if we're all 50 to 60 now, then everyone was 40 to 50. So they was, you know, the emotions were starting to show, whereas now the emotions are even more. And I think, look, the effect is seeing people happy, but seeing Ed Real on your channels, like I remember Ed coming to my first rave story. I know Ed from 1997. Ed used to book me when he was a student down in Portsmouth in 97. I was one of the first DJs to play the records he was signing to Nucleus. So I know Ed, and Ed come down, and Ed's a big vinyl man. And when I saw Ed say in your podcast with him, your deep dive into his collection, I was so proud that he said it was the inspiration to our Black Gold record fair. And that made me feel really nice that I'd managed to inspire someone who I know very well and I look up to. And also I remember it was like a year or so before there was a more upfront label market called Clashmouth. It was before that. And then also what happened with what we did was there then become lots of other spin-off art galleries and really cool local little things around East and North and South London, then some bigger galleries. Then as time's gone on, some other record fairs have come along. And it's a celebration, and it's like we've got our 10th, I don't know whether this will be out before or after then, but we're coming up to our 10th anniversary event for the Rave Story, and it's a big all day celebration that is actually a real life rave now, a real life record fair, the art gallery, everything. And to know that we sell that many tickets for something that's so unique, it makes me proud. And yeah, and I guess, John, it also goes back to that fascination with Woodstock. How can we gather people to celebrate something so special in that moment? And yeah, I think it has been influential. It has. I know that it spurred people on to write books. I know it spurred people on to open record shops. I know it spurred people on to do their own galleries. And I know it spurred people on to do their own record fairs.
What's the relevance of vinyl in today's digital world?
The relevance of vinyl in the digital world. Listen, any form of long form and any form of thing that you can hold, or any form of thing that's going to go into your brain and take it up for longer than a 1 minute scroll or a 90... Some of these tunes on digital now are 90 seconds long, right? If we as music lovers, if we as people who love art, if we as people want to inspire people beyond the scroll, to be able to hold something, to put it on the deck, or with what John's doing with his channel, be able to give people long form content that they can learn from beyond the soundbite. That's the importance of vinyl. That's the importance of having things that last longer than 90 seconds or 2 minutes, because if all our art, if all our music, if all our heritage, if all our history, if all of the love that we've shared in dance floors, through creation, through music, if all we're worth is a 60-second scroll or a 90-second tune on fucking Spotify, what the hell did we just dedicate our life to? What the hell did we experience 35 years ago? We are so important, right? Talking of memes earlier, do you remember when there was that meme going around where it was like a little Yoda and it had house music and drum and bass music on one side, and it was going, the house and the drum and bass needs to carry the old school? Do we fuck? We need to carry them and say to them, this is what needs... Stop making 90 seconds tunes. Stop dumbing yourself down. Stop doing 30 seconds of like silliness on TikTok to drive a load of people to a tune, right? Come on. We're worth more than that. We got history, we got heritage, we got feeling, we got emotion. We Our world don't need carrying by people who are now only 90 seconds tunes and not being put onto vinyl and are in this scroll world. We'll carry you lot, all right? You just come behind us and let's make some fucking long form. Let's make some tunes, cut them on vinyl, make them more than 5-6 minutes. Let's give people podcasts for hours on end, radio shows, and let's fucking celebrate and share and enjoy something that's more than 30 seconds.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Of course there fucking is. Is there anything I want to add? Music is to be loved and it's to be enjoyed and it's to be explored and it's to dive as deep as you want to into it, or it's there to just enjoy as an absolute escapism, right? And for me, there can be no gatekeeping. There can be no, you're not allowed to be into that and you're not allowed to be into this, and how dare you like happy hardcore but now all of a sudden you're talking about house music. How dare you like jungle but also like a bit of garage? Or musical snobbery is boring. If you're feeling a music, if you're loving a music, just enjoy with all the passion in the world. The world's a mess as it is, and music is a beautiful thing, and like sometimes just picking up a record and putting it on the deck and just losing yourself in that moment and that memory in your own room, in your own time, in the same way that when us as DJs play out and we've got 200 people or 2,000 people in front of us and we're sharing those collective moments, we're sharing those memories, we're sharing those things. Music is one of the greatest gifts. Music's one of the greatest gifts that any of us can have, that we can share with others. It goes family, it goes your family, your children, your wife, your husband, your mums, your dad. It goes family and then it goes music. And when I see just sometimes nastiness and bitterness and that surrounds music, as if the world ain't nasty and bitter as it is, and this is something I'm really proud of with what I do with my sharing music, is 99.9999999% of the time you share that passion, you share that love, and you see it from others, and we're sharing this amazing history, and we're in this space together. Artists, DJs, promoters, more importantly music lovers. We're all music lovers, whether we're dancing at a festival or a club at the weekend, or whether we're scrolling to people like me and John and T-Cuts and Jay Cunning and all the people who are close to us and the promoters I play for, and you see that thing that they're saying, and then you go to their rave, you buy their record, you watch their video on YouTube, and I believe that we are the last of a dying generation, and we are a generation whose currency is worth more than 30 seconds scrolling time. The scroll is just the entry level to the magic that's held on these beautiful things, the music and the memories that we all hold.
And what a tune to end with.
Do you want me to talk about the tune?
Yeah, go on then.
This is one of the most important records in the trajectory of British rave breakbeat music. And I've spoke about this in depth to Fabio on a podcast me and him done. But for whatever reason, I picked this out as the end part of this chat. And groundbreaking tune. The euphoria and the political message of the way the song's sung, the sheer aggression of Killer Man Archer's vocal. This was groundbreaking. This was life-changing, musical changing. This lasts forever. And I was pretty passionate in the Fabio interview, in which I said there was about 10 remixes done recently, and I was like, you can't fucking touch that, man. And then Fabio was like, you can't fucking touch that. I can't go because I've got to share something with you. Okay. But you might want to cut this in somewhere else at the Pull for Music bit. Record bags. And I've got tons and tons of record bags down there. I still collect record bags from when I go around. But this is an original Pull for Music record bag. And basically, there's hardly any pictures of Pull for Music because of that dusty old 60s, 70s, 80s thing. But Dave, the owner, who's 77 now, his children, and I'm in touch with them, really it's sad that Eamon's Liquid's passing meant that I got in touch with Dave, because both me and Eamon worked in Pull for Music. But no one owned one of these. I never, Eamon never, Dave, his family never, Paul's family never owned this. And I got to big up my old mate Dan J, London Jacko, another incredible record collector and historian. He was in Crazy Beat Records in Upminster one afternoon, and he phoned me and he said, Dan, I'm out the back of Upminster just paying for my order. I've just looked up at the wall and a Pull for Music record bag is in here. And I said, Dan, please tell the owner whatever he wants for it, I will buy it. Whatever this man wants, I will buy this bag off him. So I got his email. I messaged him. 10 minutes later, he phoned back and he said to me, mate, legendary record shop. We all used to go in there. There's flyers around this shop with your name on. You can have the record bag. You can have the record bag, right? So this man gives me this record bag, right? So they pull it down off the wall. As they pull it down off the wall, I look round and I see the words 50. I see an address, right? I see a little bit of an address and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, Signet Street. I went, there's another one. They never knew. In all the decades that they've been there, they never knew that they had two. They pulled it down and went, there you go. And I phoned up Dave. I said, Dave, I've got one for you and I've got one for me. And next time I see you, and apparently Ritchie told me that there is shops that can repair these and get them really good. So for some reason, my entire life through records has always rewarded me, whether it's huge residencies, dreamlike deals, or just the most emotionally amazing things that touch you, and it's all through records.
If you look at that picture up there, that's me and my best friend. He made this record, he sadly died last year, you know? And I look at that, everyone, see that down there? He made this record, we started out together, 1989. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting them to do that for me, right? And I love you lot. I love doing this thing. I love taking this music all over the UK, Europe and the world. Sadly, my friend is not here, but right now, it's up there on that screen.